welcome for another day of Let Love In Live with a first time guest. I've got PJ Dixon. Welcome, PJ.
Hi, thank you so much. It's a really honor to be here for me. Thank you so much.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you on because you're going to talk to us about having the feminine masculine complement.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. So let's jump into that. What got you interested in this?
You know, I have always loved love since I was just a little guy. I've always loved, and from a spiritual perspective, but also from that romantic perspective. And I recognized early on that there's a real difference between the masculine and the feminine because my mom is so feminine, and I just loved that nurturing, that loving nature, and the way she would embrace my sister and I, and was just such a good mom. And I always measured every woman in my life after that by the way my mom was and that nurturing nature. And I watched myself, even though I've got a very rare form of muscular dystrophy, I weigh about 75 pounds, I'm 4 feet tall in my wheelchair, I still have this masculine nature about me that wants to protect women. In fact, I actually even teach women self-defense classes. And That's just really important to me that we honor the real core of who we are. Sure, there's lots of arguments and conversations about nature versus nurture, but the truth is, like, we are born very specifically based on certain brain chemistry and brain design. And I really love the idea of being able to move with that and align ourselves with what's natural for us.
Great. So let's talk about this because masculine and feminine is such
Hmm.
a popular lingo now in the
Hmm.
whole dating world.
Hmm.
What's your opinion about masculine and feminine versus gender, male and female?
Yeah, that's great. Super important question, right? Because I actually am a little bit more feminine than most men because I love to be able to like sit and face you and have a really long conversation and like really explore my emotions. And I'm fine with that. And we would typically say that that's more of a feminine trait, right? So excluding the male and excluding the male and the female and just honoring the masculine within each one of us and the feminine within each one of us, if we recognize that they're complements of each other, not opposites of each other, they don't go against each other, they support and lift each other up, then in the moment when a masculine energy is needed, for example, if there's a woman who maybe is with her children and somebody is somehow threatening her children, then all of a sudden she's not going to go into her feminine. She's going to go into that masculine power of protecting and providing the safe space for her children, right? And then if the child is out and the child trips and falls and skins their knee, you know, she's going to probably kneel down and check out their knee and hug them and nurture them and love them back into a place where they realize that they're okay, that it hurts a little bit, but they're going to be okay, right? And so the masculine and the feminine energies are energies that exist within our universe as ways of taking care of certain activities in our lives. And they interplay within our own lives by ourselves in our interactions with other people, but they also really within a relationship can really create this sexy, intimate, really close relationship at the deepest heart and soul levels. And I love that. I love that. And what's to add to that, if I do bring in the male and the female again, just briefly, if we think about the stereotypical male-female relationship, right? And we've got a man who's in his masculine and a woman who's typically in her feminine. If a man walks up behind his lady, and I don't mean like da-dum, 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 boo, ah, I don't mean like that, right? And he scares her. I mean like she knows he's walking up behind, and a man embraces his lady from behind. The moment a man embraces his lady from behind, a lady will go, and she'll just sigh back into her feminine because without saying a single word, he's saying, babe, I've got your back. And that allows her to relax and settle into her feminine because she doesn't feel that she has to protect herself in this world anymore, that she knows that somebody else has her. And then by the same token, men don't like to be vulnerable. It's really scary for us because we pride ourselves on being strong and capable and fast and, you know, knowing things, and we don't want to be vulnerable. We don't want to be weak. We don't want to like intellectually not know. We want to be strong. Yet the one thing that we're the weakest at is expressing our emotions, stereotypically, of course, right? And so when a woman comes up to a man and protects his front, like a man protects a woman's back, right? In essence, when a woman protects the man's heart, right? Often if he's struggling and she walks up to him or she sits like on his lap and puts her hands on his chest and she just looks in his eyes and he realizes that he's safe with her, he'll settle in also. So we protect each other and we nurture each other in different ways, but they're different energies that are utilized in different ways.
Yeah. So are you saying that these are not so much behaviors, but essences that we can draw on when we need?
Yes, I hope it's okay if I'm a little bit spiritual for a moment. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay. I'm a really, really deeply spiritual guy, not particularly religious, but very spiritual. And I believe that nothing exists in the universe without that consciousness, right? And that consciousness is an exploration of itself. And the masculine energy and the feminine energy, when they come together, right? Maybe in that intimate setting, maybe through sex, maybe through just hugging, maybe through cuddling. What happens is the two energies start to merge into one unit. And we realize that there's not a separation, that there's the real truth is in that unity of that love, and they support each other, because when one feels safe in the presence of the other, then it expresses fully and completely, and when that one expresses fully and completely, the other one feels safe in the presence of the other. So when the masculine is expressing the masculine and being protective and providing and lovingly protective and lovingly providing, right, then the feminine gets to express fully, and then the feminine typically is nurturing and giving and caring. See, they both, men and women, if we separate again just for sake of language, right, the masculine power and the feminine power get energy, get power, by in two different ways. Men, or the masculine, typically gets power by taking. That's why men tease each other a lot. That's why men fight, right? Because they take each other's power. But women get power by nurturing, by loving, by being tender, by being gentle, by giving and doing for people. And the problem comes when the separation comes, when often, and I'm gonna kind of pin this on the men a little bit, okay? And this is being stereotypical, and I understand, but generally speaking, stereotypes exist for some reasons, and that we could have a longer conversation. But men, I think, went astray first. We stopped appreciating the value of the feminine in our lives. We stopped appreciating what the women in our lives were doing for us, and so in that case, women started feeling taken for granted or taken advantage of, and so the women wanted to pull away a little bit. And so what happens when we separate is um, we don't support each other. And so the man doesn't get the opportunity to get in touch with his emotions, right? Because the feminine isn't there protecting him. And the woman winds up going into her masculine and letting the feminine go, because she needs to protect herself. And so what we lose is the connection of that love, the connection of that feminine nature of love, of nurturing and giving and caring for each other.
All right. So I want to understand here, is there a way in which a woman can behave with a man that will help him, assist him to access those emotions that
Yeah.
stereotypically he has more difficulty?
Yes, absolutely. First and foremost, ladies, I love this conversation because men, when if I wish there was another man here that I could show you. When men turn to face each other, right? It seems really awkward and weird, because men only stand chest to chest when they're gonna fight, right? And I always joke, say, or make out, right? And I'm just kidding. Usually, it's like standing there to fight. Um, but women will face each other and be really close to each other, and that's how women communicate. The problem is that when a woman wants a man to express his emotions and wants to know what's going on inside, and I'm going to come at this from two different ways, okay? I'm going to also come back to this and talk about how a woman can help a man get some of this express a little bit more safely. If a woman needs to talk to her man and wants to know what's going on inside of him, often women will say things like, "Hey, babe, we need to have a conversation." And he's like, "Oh, what'd I do?" Right? Immediately he feels like he's in trouble, which is an unfortunate situation. That's maybe a bit longer conversation how to address that. But what women will often do is they'll want to sit down, sometimes in the bedroom with the door shut, and women will turn to face their man. Well, immediately when you do that, you turn him on. You don't turn him on to want it, like, to get intimate with you. You turn him on to want to fight. And then all he's going to do is going to look at the door, look at you, look at the door, look at you, look at the door, look at you. And he wants to climb over you to get out that door because he feels trapped. So one of the things that you can do, plus one of the problems with this is, even if he doesn't run from you and you ask him a question, men's brains biologically process emotions and feelings much slower than what women's do. And a woman usually has been thinking about this situation for 2 or 3 or 4 days before she actually even addresses it. So then she wants to come to a man whose brain functions slower in the emotional component or aspects and wants to say, well, babe, how do you feel about this? Why are we doing this? What's going on in you? And he's like, feeling, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. And so he's struggling with trying to figure out what he wants, how he wants to answer and how he feels and assess and think and all of this crazy stuff going on in his mind. But on the outside of him, the lady is sitting there like, oh, I see. You're not going to answer the question. You're just trying to think of the way to answer the question and to keep yourself out of trouble. Now, let me tell you something, mister. Now you're in all kinds of trouble. Now I'm really pissed because you don't want to answer the question. I see what's really going on here. And all kinds of crazy stuff happens in her mind. And he's still going, feel, feel, feel. How do I feel? Feel. I don't feel. Right. And so it's such a crazy situation. So, ladies, if you want to have a conversation with your man, go for a walk with him. Because if you notice when men are in the clubs together or if they're at a party together, even if men are sort of facing each other, they're often angled off from each other. They're not square like I am to the camera. They'll often be angled in some way and talking to each other like this so they can also still scan, because we're designed to scan the horizon and make sure that the lions and the enemies aren't coming, because we're designed to be protectors. And of course, we can argue and say that's nurture versus nature, and sure, there might be some of that, but I think biologically we are designed that way. And there's research that shows when you give a boy, a Barbie doll, if you give two boys Barbie dolls, the Barbie dolls turn into swords, right? And if you give girls Barbie dolls, they often turn in, they want to nurture and love. And there's nothing wrong with this. These are beautiful components of us as human beings, and it doesn't have to be about men and women. It's just about the masculine versus the feminine. Okay. So, ladies, go for a walk with your man and ask him a question, and ask him one small question and allow him to really think about that. And the reason I say go for a walk is because then he doesn't feel trapped. You guys are walking side by side, and you can watch the birds or the children play in a park, or you can feel the sun on your skin. Cars are driving by, so your visuals and your auditory senses are taken up. You don't feel like that pause while he's thinking about it takes so long. Does that make sense? Is that helpful?
Yeah, that totally makes sense.
Okay.
So a couple
Okay.
things that come up for me. One,
Yeah.
that
Yes.
women may be mistakenly sabotaging their ability to have a
Mhm.
real conversation with their man by doing that face-to-face thing. Which,
Yeah, unknowingly.
yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that's really funny is I remember when my sister had her son, she was going to make sure he had a balance both the
Yeah.
masculine and the feminine, and
Yeah.
gave him Barbie dolls. And it's like, Barbie dolls? I just want cars and wheels and tractors.
And you know what? Here's the thing. There's a great book called The Care of the Soul by Thomas More. Thomas More I think he was a sequestered monk. And the book really talks about how children will tell you who they are and what they want to do and why they came. And so it's our job just to listen. And you might have a boy child who's a little bit softer, a little more feminine, a little kinder, a little sweeter. And that's absolutely okay. You may have a little girl who's a little tomboy and wants to play sports and play with the cars and wrestle with the boys. And that's okay too. Let's just honor who they are. When we honor the essence of a child, then that child grows up to operate with more integrity. And that's super important in our adult lives, because we often do things that we feel obligated to do. And that's not a way to live. The best way to live is to live with authentic expression that's within inside of your own heart and your own mind. Who are you? What are you? What do you really want to do? And people value that. People appreciate that. And that's so very, very important.
All right, so let's get into more discussion about masculine and feminine. We
All
live in
right.
a very masculine world where both
Mm-hmm.
men or women on their to-do list, achieve, perform,
Mm-hmm.
effective, efficient. How does that impact both dating and relationships?
Are you asking how does masculine and feminine impact the dating relationships? Or are you asking how the world's perspective of us being kind of a patriarchal society still affect dating relationships?
Yeah, it's like we're not, society doesn't really support us being vulnerable and soft and in
Mhm,
our emotions. The
mhm,
society really encourages achievement, productivity.
mhm, mhm,
So that's going to show up in our romantic
mhm,
relationships.
mhm,
How do you
mhm.
feel that that affects our romantic relationships?
I think that it's a real unfortunate situation because I really feel like we are experiencing a loss of the feminine. And I have a lot of friends and there's actual research right now that demonstrates that boys are also under attack, also. The masculine is also under attack. And give me a minute. I like to feel things before I say them. So I want it to come from my heart, not from my head. So give me one moment. Um, the essence of the feminine is the nurturing and the giving, and we think that that doesn't have the ability to be productive. But what we're finding is that when a woman runs her business um, with that softness and that kindness and that generosity and that gentleness, that people start to really feel comfortable with her, for example. And in the business world, we don't do business with business. We do business with people. People do business with people, right? And so, if a woman can enter into a relationship where she's soft and she's kind and she's nurturing, but she also is able to hold that line, right? Just because you're able to hold a line doesn't mean that you're necessarily in your masculine, because you can love somebody from this softness and say, you know what you're saying and doing is not going to work. That doesn't work because it doesn't create a balance for everybody. It doesn't create an understanding. And so it is possible for us to live in this world incorporating more of the feminine. And then the way that society is currently impacting our relationships with that kind of especially like Western culture, American culture, this idea of like, we've got to go, we have to achieve, we have to accomplish, we have to do this, right? And that idea of the masculine constantly on the go, constantly creating, constantly doing, constantly making and building and molding and manipulating, that can interrupt the flow of intimacy because you feel like you have to do, you have to experience, you have to create versus like really getting to know each other. So I'm a big advocate of Tantra practices. Tantra is kind of a sacred sexual union. And if we take the sexuality out of it just for a moment, the actual physical act out of it, but we leave the sexuality, the intimacy in, then what happens is the world slows down a little bit and there's an opportunity for the feminine and the masculine to unite in this bond of love, this sense of unity and oneness. And so, um, there's nothing wrong with an active lifestyle and accomplishing and experiencing and doing all this stuff and doing lots of fun stuff, but let's not do that at the expense of intimacy. Let's find the appropriate balance, because the more intimate you are and connected, the more fun things you'll do. But if the only thing you focus on is the fun things and you wind up lacking some of the intimacy, then the relationship may not last the test of time, because it's intimacy that sees a relationship through to the end. It's that level of trust and safety and connection. I'm not sure that I answered your question based on what you were asking.
I think you answered even more because
Okay.
what I want to do is I want to acknowledge you right now for modeling what it
Mm,
means to slow down a little bit and
mm,
come from your feminine,
mm,
connect to your heart rather
mhm,
than give a cognitive an answer
mhm.
from your head.
Yeah. Thank you. And that's how I move. That's who I am. That's how I love. I'm a different kind of guy because I am connected to my feminine. And honestly, I love that part of me. That's a part that I would never want to change. But there's also a masculine side. I did another summit yesterday for a gentleman, and it was specifically to men. And I was much more assertive and much more intentional and much more like, look, ladies are coming to me now and they're telling me there's a change. The women used to say to me that they wanted a man who was funny, but now they're saying they want a man who leads. And so you can tell the sound of my voice is a little bit different. I'm a little more assertive, right? This is me being in my masculine. And so there's a time for that. But right now with your audience, that's not the time. The time is to come from my heart. And this is what I like. This is the real PJ. This is the PJ that I feel is my essence. Yesterday wasn't not the real PJ. It was still the real PJ, double negatives. It was still the real PJ, but it was a PJ in a certain situation for a certain reason, right? And so there's not an integrity loss if sometimes you're soft and sometimes you're hard, if sometimes you're feminine and sometimes you're masculine. There's not an integrity loss there. You are recognizing the need for a particular energy, but it's important to identify why that need is there. Is that need there because you're protecting yourself because you're afraid? And so you're coming into your masculine. Is it because you believe that feminine is weak and that feminine has no power? And so you're living in your masculine and casting aside your feminine. Because I'll tell you what, like if we're talking about letting love in, really, men, if ladies, if you are really truly looking to either strengthen your current relationship or find a really good man in your life, the more feminine you are, the more men are actually going to be attracted to you because you become open and receptive. Um, I'm going to use a sexual metaphor without intending to be graphic or distasteful, but it's a really perfect metaphor that I use quite often. The penis is designed for thrusting, right? And so if we look at that as masculine energy, it's all about like driving forward and creating and forcing and you know uh, in essence asserting itself, right? But then the vagina, when the woman feels safe and um, is comfortable and wants to be physically intimate with this man, the vagina becomes soft and open, right, and receptive, just like a woman's heart. And so when women are in their feminine, then a man feels safe enough to approach you, feels safe enough to enter her space, to come up and speak with her. So a lot of times the good men are the ones who don't come up and approach you because they, even men, even masculine men, sometimes don't want to be shot down. But if you have that kind of um, protective shell up, where maybe you've kind of got, forgive me, ladies, I don't necessarily like this term, but I'm going to use it, the stereotypical bitch face, right? Or just kind of that resting face. Forgive me, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but it's just a common term, at least in the United States. Um, the only men that come up and talk to you most often, like 98, 99% of the men that will come up and talk to you are players, because they look at that and they don't care about what the emotion is. They're just looking at your body and they're thinking about dominating that attitude and that personality. But when you smile and you're open and receptive and you greet people first and you touch people on their shoulder or their back, or you hug people and you're loving and you're just generally sweet, like this feminine nature comes out, wow, the men are attracted to you. They fall for you. They fall in love with you, and they feel safer to come up and talk to you. Now, it would be really nice if the men were, masculine and comfortable coming up to talk to you and had good conversation. But sometimes men need a little bit of encouragement. And so that sweetness, that little bit of flirting, that giving them the indication from across the room that it would be okay if you came up and talked to them, or if they came up and talked to you, that's helpful for us as men to know that you like what you see, and it would be okay if I came over and talked to you, or another man came over and talked to you.
Yeah, I really love a few things. One, you talk about really honoring your essence and who you are,
Mm,
and that you
yes.
can draw on the masculine or the feminine depending on the situation that you're in.
Hmm.
And that if you're looking to have men approach you, if you want to get into a relationship,
Hmm.
become really aware of that energy or that essence that you're putting
Hmm.
out,
Hmm.
because that will really impact whether a man feels safe enough to approach you.
Yeah. And it's so crazy, right? Because we think the masculine is all about power and strength and control and domination. But yet when we come into the presence of a woman, we're like, okay, I'm not going to say anything because I don't know if she likes me. And so I'm a little bit nervous. We're all afraid. We're all afraid. We're not afraid all the time, but we are afraid sometimes. And sometimes that confidence can be built up really quickly and expressed more naturally if we feel like, okay, it's safe to go in. Okay. And then when we go in, like to meet somebody or go into a situation that is uncomfortable for us, when we realize, oh, this isn't dangerous, this isn't unpleasant, then all of a sudden our confidence level goes right back up. Okay. And so please don't feel like men are losing their masculine and that men don't approach you. Maybe instead, ladies, maybe look and think, okay, how could I invite him to approach me? There's all kinds of ways of flirting. There's all kinds of ways of just smiling and keeping his gaze for a little while and then looking down and then looking back and looking down again, right? Which like is kind of like coy and says, oh, I think you're cute. It would be okay to come and talk to me. And so there are all kinds of ways for you to let a man know that you would be interested in conversation. And it's okay also to walk up and just say, hey, I know this is a little forward and I wouldn't normally do this, but I saw you from across the bar and I just wanted to come and say hello. My name is, right? And then see if he can carry a conversation with you. And if he can, fantastic. maybe you'll be really, really glad in a year or two when you guys are getting married that you actually did that. And maybe it'll be a fun story. And maybe you'll be able to be like, oh, super glad I did that because check, he's off, and move on to the next gentleman.
And there's no regrets.
You say again?
And then there's no regrets. Oh, I should
Yeah.
have said something.
Oh, I know. Regrets are the worst, right? We go home after being at somebody's party where we didn't have the courage to walk up and say something. We talk to our friend about that guy or that girl on the way home. They're like, "Why didn't you say something?" I don't know. I just didn't. I was afraid that they wouldn't, like me, or I didn't know what to say. Oh, that's such a sad way to live. Don't miss out on the juicy deliciousness of life simply by honoring what is really moving inside of you. Remember, I said a little bit ago that I'm a pretty spiritual guy, right? The word desire, if you look at its original root, desire, means of or from the Father, right? So maybe, and again, this maybe sounds like I'm getting religious, but just humor me for a moment, okay? And I'm not trying to be patriarchal, I promise, right? But maybe if we look at that as something spiritual, maybe there is a desire within you that we should honor. And if we move with that, maybe we will find out that we're really glad that we did, right? So a lot of times people don't live out their passions in life or the things that they really truly want to do in their life. And if they did, they would always be glad, or almost always glad that they did. So maybe start to pay attention to what moves you and chase that a little bit more in your lives.
All right, PJ. Now I know you put together a special offer for our viewers, so I think this is a perfect time to share that. Could you share?
Absolutely. Ladies, I love love. It's the best ever. And there are so many times on summits and podcasts where at the very end, people are invited to share or give away something free. And so, of course, I would absolutely love to give something to you for free. And I'm going to, but it's not going to be an ebook. It's not going to be all of my audios on meditation or any of that. Stuff like that is really good and can be fascinating and wonderful. But what I found is that often ladies just want to have a conversation with somebody. The gentleman that might be listening to this might just want to have a conversation with somebody because makes much more sense to actually talk to somebody about your personal situation and ask questions relevant to where you are in your life. So I would love to give you my free 30-minute Discovering True Love conversation. It's just a 30-minute call with me, completely free, where we chat about where you are in your life and what it is that you want. And I'm able to offer, one or two or three ideas that might move you in the direction that you want to go. Don't miss an opportunity to actually talk with me because it's much better to be able to ask your questions instead of trying to take the general information that I might be providing and apply it to your life. So let's make it specific.
And it's very generous of you, PJ. And if this resonates with you, I really encourage you. Right below the video here is a link. Click on PJ's link and take him up on his half-hour of one-on-one time with you. And PJ, if there was one thing you would hope our viewers take away from our call today, what would that be?
That femininity is critical and crucial in our world today. And the way you can access that is by finding time to nurture yourself, by nurturing your sensual existence. And by sensual existence, again, I'm not talking sexual. I'm talking your sense of smell, your sense of taste, your sense of touch and texture, and visuals and auditory. So if you need some downtime, take a bath, do some meditation, go for a walk in nature, go into your garden, go for a run if you like to be a little bit more physical, but find some way of nurturing yourself because when you nurture yourself, you fill up. And when you fill up, you have more to offer. And when you have more to offer, you will naturally exude that feminine grace and that will attract men. So the more you take care of you and nurture you and love you, the more you will draw attention to you. And more people want to be like you and more people will want to be with you. You change the world by loving yourself first.
Yeah, I'm actually writing that down. Change the world by loving yourself first.
Yes, ma'am.
And with that, PJ, I want to say thank you so much for the time that you've given us, for this free offer that you've given our viewers. Very generous. and for the difference and the modeling that you do in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I love love, and I love you, and I love all of your audience. Even though I don't know you, audience, I have love for you. So thank you so much for listening, and have a beautiful day, all of you.